Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997. Historical evolution of RA 871. IPRA, formerly known as an Ancestral Domain Bill, was first filed in the Congress sometime in 1987 under the Senate Bill No. 909, authored by Senator Santanina Rasul, Senator Joseph Estrada, and Senator Alberto Romulo during the 8th Congress, but was never enacted into law. In the 9th Congress, Senator Rasul introduced Senate Bill No. 1029 and Senator Gloria Macapagal Arroyo introduced Senate Bill No. 1849. However, the bill was never sponsored and deliberated upon on the floor. Despite these failed efforts, the IPOS decided to give another try. 7 non-negotiable points of the bill that were promoted are the following: A. Recognition of native title and rights of indigenous peoples to ancestral domains. B. Respect for the right to cultural integrity. C. Recognition of indigenous peoples' political structures and governance. D. Delivery of basic services to the indigenous peoples. E. Respect for human rights. F. And creation of an office that would cater to IP's needs. G. Elimination of discrimination. Indigenous people of the Philippines. The Philippines is a culturally diverse country with an estimated 14 to 17 million indigenous peoples belonging to 110 ethno-linguistic groups. They are mainly concentrated in Northern Luzon, Cordillera Administrative Region 33%, and Mindanao 61%, with some groups in the Visayas area as of 2013. Term indigenous people as used to reflect the contemporary international language, which was formally adopted in 1993. The term indigenous cultural communities was used in the Philippine Constitution to describe a group of people sharing common bonds of language, customs, tradition, and other distinctive cultural traits, and who have under claims of ownership since time immemorial occupied, possessed, and utilized a territory. Ancestral domains. The 1997 IPRA law defined ancestral domains as areas generally belonging to ICCs or IPs comprising lands, inland waters, coastal areas, and natural resources held under a claim of ownership, occupied or possessed by ICC IPs by themselves or through their ancestors. Commonly or individually since time immemorial, continuously to the present even when interrupted by war, force majeure or displacement by force, deceit, steal, or a consequence of government projects or any other voluntary dealings entered into the government and private individuals or corporation, and which are necessary to ensure their economic, social, and cultural welfare. According to Chapter 3, Section 5 of the document, the indigenous concept of ownership generally holds that ancestral domains are the ICCs or IPs, private but community property which belongs to all generations and therefore cannot be sold, disposed, or destroyed. Ancestral lands. Ancestral lands as stated in the law refer to lands occupied, possessed, and utilized by individuals, families, and clans who are members of the ICC or IPs since time immemorial by themselves or through their predecessors in interest under claims of individual or traditional group ownership, continuously to the present even when interrupted by war, force majeure or displacement by force, deceit, steal, or a consequence of government projects and other voluntary dealings entered into by government and private individuals or corporations, including but not limited to residential lots, rice, terraces or paddies, private forests, Sweden farms, and tree lots. Rights to Ancestral Domain. Chapter 3, Section 7 of the Republic Act No. 8371/1997 covers the 8 rights to ancestral domain. This chapter focuses on the identification and protection of the entitlement of the indigenous cultural communities and the indigenous peoples as the proper owners of their ancestral land. The following rights are listed below. Social justice and human rights. This chapter in the IPRA was written to recognize the indigenous people right to the same privilege and protection also afforded by the state to its citizens, equal protection and non-discrimination of ICCs or IPs, patterned after international standards set by the Charter of the United Nations, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the Equal Protection Clause in the Philippine 1987 Constitution. This section places the state as duly responsible for the execution of the IP's human rights. Rights during armed conflict. As signatory to the Geneva Convention, the state is expected to ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances, including local and international armed conflict. Freedom from discrimination and right to equal opportunity. Unlawful acts pertaining to employment, basic services. The law guarantees indigenous people's right to basic social services as provided by the state. As a vulnerable group, special attention is given for the immediate, effective, and continuing improvement of their economic and social conditions. Women, children, and youth. The law also emphasized that these rights are also to be afforded to indigenous women and children. The provision should not result in the diminution of rights and privilege already recognized and afforded to these groups under existing laws of general applications. Gaps in the law. Section 56 of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997 or the IPRA law states that property rights within the ancestral domains already existing and or vested upon effectivity of this act shall be recognized and respected. This section is problematic as it means that any title before 1997 holds more weight than ancestral claim. Scholars and pro-indigenous groups have criticized this section as it effectively destroys any ancestral land claim before 1997. Historians have pointed out the most indigenous groups in the Philippines have been in the archipelago prior to Spanish occupation in the 15th century.